Good morning, everyone. Morning. All right, get your coffee and your breakfast paraphernalia and make your way to your seat because we have an action-packed day and it's time to get started. Quick show of hands. How many people saw a show last night? Good. I was looking over the different productions and was really amazed by the diversity of the work being done here in Dallas. Another quick show of hands. Who here is from the Dallas-Fort Worth area? Excellent. That is fantastic. I want to second what Teresa said last night. We're all so grateful for the hospitality and the warmth you've shown us every time we've visited this year. There's something exciting going on here in the theater scene, and if you haven't felt it yet, you will. And thank you to all of our local supporters who gave generous funds to sponsor artists and theaters from the Dallas-Fort Worth area to attend the conference and become members of TCG. A round of applause for them. My name is Kevin Moore. I'm the vice principal of TCG. And I have the great pleasure of talking until everybody's seated and sipping their coffee so we can give a proper welcome to Mr. James Bundy. James is a TCG board member and the artistic director of Yale Repertory Theater, and he is going to give out the TCG Theater Practitioner Award and then moderate our next session. So please join me in welcoming James Bundy to the stage.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Good morning, everybody. Oh, that's good. Thank you. I am honored to introduce this session, Defining a Movement, Exploring Movements of the Past, Present, and Future. This plenary offers us an opportunity to reconnect with some of the deepest ideals and aspirations of the nonprofit theater, aspirations and ideals that are expressed idiomatically by artists and companies of artists all over the nation. From time to time in our history, a significant number of artists and/or companies have espoused similar ideals and practices, so that we begin to refer to them as being part of a movement. It would be possible, though impractical, to assemble dozens and dozens of compelling speakers on this topic just from among this audience. But to begin today's conversation, we'll hear from three of our colleagues who will join me on stage in succession. To borrow lightly from Henry V, I ask that you piece out our imperfections with your thoughts and divide each of our speakers into 1,000 parts so that you will see these men and this woman as emblematic not only of you, the many leaders represented in our audience today, but also of our friends and colleagues who cannot be here with us. Later in the program, we'll broaden the discussion to hear your thoughts and questions for the panelists and each other. Not coincidentally, it is also my honor at this time to present the TCG Theater Practitioner Award for 2013 to the first of our three speakers. The award recognizes an individual whose work in the American theater has evidenced exemplary achievement over time and who has contributed significantly to the development of the larger field. I think it is safe to say that our honoree this morning meets these qualifications. Indeed, because we speak this morning of definitions, one might argue that he defined these qualifications at the same time that he was defining so many other aspects of the American theater that we might take for granted today. A native of the tiny town of Van in West Texas, our honoree worked with Margot Jones, and it was a bit part in her production of Lawrence and Lee's Inherit the Wind that brought him to New York City in 1955. There, he began staging plays in the nascent off-Broadway movement, directing 14 productions before leaving New York. In 1963, with support from the newly created National Endowment for the Arts, he founded what would become Trinity Repertory Company in a church basement. You have by now perhaps guessed the name of our honoree, and you may also be familiar with other highlights of his tremendous legacy. How he created and sustained a resident acting company at Trinity Rep that remains to this day a source of tremendous pride both to that theater and to the profession. How he was fired by Trinity Rep's board in 1975, and how through a groundswell of community support he was able to replace the entire board, keep his position, and secure funding for a new theater. how he became the first artistic director to run two major theaters, Trinity Rep in his home state's Dallas Theater Center, simultaneously. You may know these things about our honoree, Adrian Hall, but you may not know that he was also instrumental in establishing an education program that brought every single high school student in Rhode Island to multiple Trinity Rep shows. Every student in the state seeing 12 plays before they left high school. And what a range of plays. Billy Budd, plays by Racine, contemporary plays dealing with gay themes, classic comedies, Shakespeare. With his trusted collaborator, designer Eugene Lee, Adrian pioneered site-specific staging, producing King Lear in a barn and The Visit in an old railroad depot. He was also a noted adapter, transforming Robert Penn Warren's All the King's Men and Jack Henry Abbott's In the Belly of the Beast into vital works for the stage. His directing career encompassed distinguished productions all over the country and on Broadway, and included a legendary production of Buried Child at my own theater, Yale Repertory Theater, in 1979, featuring then Yale School of Drama students Polly Draper and Tony Shalhoub. In a 1986 interview in American Theater magazine, Adrian, then in the middle of leading two theaters separated by thousands of miles, said, "In the next 20 years, the question is whether or not we're going to be able to turn these institutions into things that can be expressive in a genuine and significant way. Will our young artists take up the cudgel? Do they really know that they've got to fight for this? If they don't, darling, we're going to lose all the stuff we have literally staked our lives on." Please join me in welcoming and congratulating the recipient of the 2013 TCG Theater Practitioner Award, an artist and leader of extraordinary ideals and accomplishment, and a man who staked his life on the American theater, making it immeasurably richer, Adrian Hall.
Thank you. Please sit down. Sit down. At my age, it's impossible to tell a story quickly. And so for that reason, I have jotted down some few notes so you'll be able to get out once lunch is ready. My childhood was perfect. When I grew up in a rural community in East Texas, aunts, uncles, cousins, dogs, goats, cows, lots of cows, two sisters, prettier and smarter than me, but I was the youngest, and I was a boy. My daddy carefully explained the many privileges that fact would provide me throughout my life. But sad to say, life changed after that and was never perfect again. Playwright Oscar Wilde's statement, "The two great turning points in my life was when my father sent me to Oxford and society sent me to prison." And here's the extraordinary thing about that. Over a century later, with the billions of scandals and the millions of words written every day since that time, people still smile at the irony and the simplicity of that raw statement. What does that tell us about the power of our ancient craft? The first great turning point in my life began in 1946 when I went to the Pasadena Community Playhouse to study with the great actor, teacher Gilmore Brown. The second great turning point came many years later, probably around 1963, when I stumbled headlong into a revolution. It was not a direct route for me. After the Army, I returned to the States to find that some catastrophic gender shift was taking place. All of those privileges that my da had promised me because I was born a man In Dallas, Margot Jones was defining her professional rep company. And in Washington, D.C., Zelda Fitzhandler was producing in an old brewery. And in Houston, Nina Vance was working out of an abandoned fan factory. So when Joanna Albus offered me an apprenticeship in her new glamorous theater in Houston, I did not hesitate. And before the feds closed the glamorous theater, I had directed 5 plays there and legitimately became a professional director. But before that, 2 years teaching public school, 14 off-Broadway plays, stock, showcases, bus and truck, Omaha, Nebraska, Charlotte, North Carolina, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and after unceremoniously being drafted into the Army, the 7th Army Rep Company touring 4 European countries. Tap dancers, fire eaters, and accordion players. But unlike Willie Loman, I had determined to not fall asleep at the wheel and go off the road. In 1963, I had half-heartedly gone to direct a play I had done 3 times before to a town where the last legit theater that existed there was the Albee Stock Company in 1940, with Spencer Tracy as its leading man. The future for the theater in Providence, Rhode Island did not look bright. But as Lorelei Lee noted, fate keeps on happening. President John F. Kennedy was killed in this very city, and America suffered a great guilt trip. And Roger Stevens, a Broadway commercial producer who had bought and sold the Empire State Building, became the first chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts at a salary of $1 a year. Something was definitely happening in the not-for-profit theater, and my role in it was just beginning. Now, I'm going to digress long enough to have a drink of water. I don't know. I used to say it was because I drank so much gin, but I didn't have any gin last night. Trinity had been open for 2 years in the second-floor Sunday school building of the First Methodist Church located across from a graveyard in Trinity Square. Now, Roger Stevens and Catherine Bloom of the Office of Education announced together they were creating a program for the introduction of young people to the theater. I've got the wrong glasses on. Excuse me. No wonder I can't read my own. Here we go. Not many people can afford glasses for reading and walking. Oh. Trinity had been open for 2 years in the second-floor Sunday school building of the First Methodist Church. I've already read that. Okay, now to digress. Roger Stevens and Catherine Bloom of the Office of Education announced together they were creating a program for the introduction of young people to the theater. It was to be called the Educational Laboratory Theater Project. And it was to be well-funded for 3 years. Now, to digress just a moment, earlier I had directed a production of Mother Courage in Milwaukee that had been reviewed by Stanley Kaufman in the New York Times and was seen by the movie actor Gregory Peck, who was on the National Arts Council. And he had written me a kind of fan letter about it. Now, to digress again, when the usual supportive local press, the Providence Journal, saw the words well-funded, the headline read, "Providence to have Broadway-caliber theater." Claiborne Pell's name was mentioned discreetly, and buried deep in the article, it pointed out that Trinity would still remain in town and continue its controversial off-Broadway type theater. I responded rather ungraciously. I said that in the real world, Harold Pinter was not considered controversial. And furthermore, if money came from the government to Rhode Island for theater and Trinity was not considered, we would take our dollies and dishes and go where we were appreciated. Well, the brouhaha that followed that boiled over the entire state, from Providence to Newport, which is only 40 miles. and ended with supporters and distractors, Roger Stevens and Gregory Peck, and all staring in disbelief at each other in the same room in Providence. Now, your theater seats 120 people. How could you possibly play enough performances for 40,000 students 4 times a year? Dr. Bush Brown, who was head of the Rhode Island School of Design, stumbled to his feet and said, "We are prepared to turn over our auditorium in downtown Providence. It seats 1,000 people." And then Mr. Peck said, "Is it within walking distance of downtown?" And Roger said, "Indeed, are there 40,000 students without the Catholic schools in the entire state?" And a nun rose and said, "We will include the Catholic students." And then a Newport dowager stood up and said, "And the students from Newport will be bused into Providence." And there was a long silence after that. And now Roger asked solemnly, would the entire community and the state of Rhode Island be supportive of this project? And the reply was so loud it could be heard on one side to Pawtucket and on the other side to Cranston. And Gregory Peck laughed, and old sour Roger smiled, and the laboratory theater project became Project Discovery, and it is still in existence today. And the regional theater movement was heard around the world. I think this is what I'm supposed to do.
Thank you for that uplift, Adrian. In 1978, in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, Laurie McCants co-founded the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, where she works as an actor, director, playwright, grant writer, international liaison, and occasional hauler and trucker. In 2010, she was named an Actor of Distinguished Achievement through a Fox Foundation Resident Actor Fellowship, funded by the William and Eva Fox Foundation, administered by TCG. She currently serves as the president of the Board of Trustees for the Network of Ensemble Theaters. Please welcome Laurie McCants.
Hi, y'all. Excuse me, Adrian. Grateful, so grateful to you, groundbreaker.
Thank you, darling.
So, on to the topic at hand, the ensemble theater movement. Allow me to digress. One of my fellow ensemble members, Elizabeth Dowd, had a mom who lived out her later years in Bloomsburg with her daughter. So we all became Mama Pat's grown-up adopted kids. Mama Pat was from Mississippi, a true Southern lady, all shiny and bristly, salty and sweet. But there were certain topics that a lady just did not talk about. Example, Elizabeth was in 5th grade, working on a science project. She had picked a petunia from the yard, and she brought it in to do her demonstration for her mother in the living room. Here's the pistil, here's the stamen, here's the ovary. Elizabeth remembers that Mama Pat seemed awfully nervous during this. And when Elizabeth finished, there was this pause. And finally, Mama Pat said, "You know, you, Betsy, are not unlike the petunia." And that was the launch into the Facts of Life talk. So now let me launch. Let me tell you some facts of life regarding the American theater ecosystem, and I won't beat around the bush. I'm here to tell... You laughed, great. I'm here to tell you something that a lot of you already know. I'm here to tell you that it's a fact of life that ensembles are an essential part of the American theater ecosystem. Mark Valdez, leader of the network of ensemble theaters, says this all the time. Right, Mark? Yeah, all right. And he's right. Our entire theater field, all of it, theater field, flourishes as a polyculture. We need all kinds of theater all over the field if any of our theaters are expected to grow. We need the petunias, the native corn, the heirloom tomatoes, the bananas, the plantains, the kale, the hybrid roses, the cilantro, and the bees. Bless them. Pray that we find out how to keep them. As Todd London said recently in one of his ringing exhortations about the state of American theater, take a tip from the apples. In art, as in botany, monoculture leads to decline. Biodiversity and cross-pollination are necessary for our survival. The same is true of a democratic art, and none is more democratic in its bones than theater. My fellow founders of the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble and I, we were kids of the 60s. We had and still have a deep and textured love for democracy. We were inspired by the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement, the guerrilla theater movement, the experimental theater movement, the living theater, the Negro Theater Ensemble, the performance group, the open theater, bread and puppet, free Southern theater, El Teatro Campesino. In college in 1974, I took a seminar in 20th century American experimental and activist theater. And I can still see the page in my notebook where I wrote, El Teatro Campesino, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Look them up. Luis Valdez, you in the house? Grateful to you, groundbreaker. So back in 1978, when my fellow fools and I founded the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, we already knew that we were part of a movement. We were aware of other contemporary ensembles that had already created a body of work: Mabou Mines, the Wooster Group, San Francisco Mime Company, the Talking Band, Pickle Family Circus. Our influences not only included all those wonderful ornery experimentalists and activists, but also those who had gone before: the group theater, the Provincetown Players, Eva Le Gallienne's Civic Repertory Theater, Hallie Flanagan's Federal Theater Project, the Moscow Art Theater, the Manigan Ensemble, Moliere's Company, the Commedia Troupes, Shakespeare's Players. Yes, we were inspired not only by our contemporaries like Steppenwolf, by a bunch of dead guys and a handful of dead gals, founding mothers and fathers of our movement. We remember you. It turned out that the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble had landed on fertile soil. Our town and surrounding regions supported us. They still do. We planted ourselves there in our town, and in many ways, our isolation has been a blessing. But we also yearned to break out of our isolation. We started very early on coming to TCG conferences, where we began to find out that there were others like us. We began to find each other in the hallways, on the outskirts of the picnic tables, in the far dark corners of the cash bars. And we did what good kids of the 60s do. We began to organize. We created the network of ensemble theaters. Those early organizers included Actors Gang, Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, Carpetbag Theater Company, Cornerstone, Del Arte International, Double Edge, Heartbeat, The Independent Eye, Irondale Ensemble, The Road Company. We remember you. Roadside, Sandglass, Teatro de la Jeune Lune. We remember you. Theater Grotesco, Touchstone, and Traveling Jewish Theater. We remember you. Our movement grew, and we had gatherings. We made a manifesto. Some of us were kids of the 60s, remember? We had more gatherings. We have great gatherings. Hey, you out there who've been to NEC gatherings, can I get a witness? Yeah. How we define ensemble was something we struggled with for a few years, but we decided to take a lesson from the apples and deliberately made our definition as polycultural as possible, because that's what we are, polycultural, diverse. Some of us are dedicated to developing distinctive regional voices. Some of us are primarily engaged in social and political change. Some of us are on the technological cutting edge. Some of us are really into sock puppets. Some of us like culture clash, unpack contemporary culture. Some of us, like Theater of Jugend, dig deep into ancient traditions. Some of us do new plays. Some of us reanimate the classics. Some of us perform in storefronts. Some of us perform in cyberspace. Some of us are devoted to physical theater. Some of us are devoted to text. Some of us make work really fast. Some of us take years in creating a piece. Some of us are international. Some of us are locally sourced. What we share is that we are artist-centered and artist-empowered. And we engage in collaborative process. And through the net, we are more and more collaborating with each other. There's a lot of cross-pollination going on. That said, here's NET's definition of ensemble. An ensemble is a group of individuals dedicated to collaborative creation, committed to working together consistently over years to develop a distinctive body of work and practices. NET is deeply committed to supporting the growing movement of collaborative performance makers, uplifting the values intrinsic to an ensemble process: transparency, mutual respect, equity, inclusion, and democratic structures. Along the way, we've gathered up a lot of ensembles. So here's a partial list. It's a sampling of names of ensembles that I haven't already mentioned. This partial list includes those who've been active in NET in some way or another and are current members. And I've also thrown in some ensembles whose names I think are really cool. So here we go. American Blues Theater, Annex Theater, Aerial Dance Theater, Art Farm, Art Spot, Beau Jest, Bedlam, Blessed Unrest, Bond Street, Buffalo Sound Painting, Carpetbag Brigade, Chance Theater, Cleveland Public Theater, Critical Mass Cultural Odyssey, DNA Works, Dad's Garage, Dog and Pony DC, Flux Theater Ensemble, Fool's Fury, Grand Guignolers, Goat in the Road, Ghost Road, Hand to Mouth, Honolulu Theater for Youth, Ibex Puppetry, In the Mix, Jumpstart, Junebug, Theater Works, Looking Glass, Los Angeles Poverty Department, Maryland Ensemble Theater, Mondo Bizarro, Mugabe, Men Under Guidance, Acting Before Early Extinction. NACL, New Paradise Laboratories, New World Performance Laboratory, Neo-Futurist, Olive Dance Theater, Out of Hand, Pangea World Theater, Pearl de Moore, Performance Project, Pig Iron, Ping Chong and Company, Play Builders of Hawaii, Pontine Theater, Post Natium Collective, Progress Theater, Pure Theater, Quest Visual Theater, Ragged Wing Ensemble, Rude Mex, Salty Shakespeare, Sandbox, Single Carrot, City Company, Sledgehammer, Sojourn, Son of Semele, Strange Attractors, Strike Anywhere Performance Ensemble, Teatro Productions, Team Sunshine, Teatro Americano, Theater Ninjas, Theater Novimos, Theater Offensive, Theater of Yugen, Theater Simple, Universes, Watts Village Theater Company, Workhorse, Recchio Ensemble, Vortex. There you go. There's our movement. NET is a movement that moves, literally. We're wrapping up our latest cycle of MicroFest, which took us to Detroit, to Appalachia, to New Orleans, and will end up next week in Honolulu. Photos, mixtapes, response essays written in partnership with Animating Democracy are all on our website. Look it up. I'll leave you with one of my favorite takeaways from this MicroFest journey so far. In Detroit, we saw an amazing work in progress by an artist collective, an ensemble called Complex Movements, led by a hip-hop lyricist activist named Invincible. Their piece explores the relationship between complex science and social movements. It's an immersive, interactive performance inspired by their mentor, the great Detroit activist artist Grace Lee Boggs. Look her up. And the current scientific study of the phenomenon of emergence, which investigates how change occurs in nature and how those lessons might apply to social change. Through music, creative technology, and rhyme, Invincible and her collaborators draw the parallels between the forces that cause a field of fireflies to light up in synchronous rhythm, to the grassroots movement springing up to rebuild Detroit. They both are emergent forces, networks leading to communities of practice, out of which suddenly and surprisingly emerge systems of influence that produce sustained change. Or, as Invincible says, from the ground up, say, let it grow. From the ground up, say, let it grow. From the ground up, say, let it grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurie. No problem embodying 1,000 people for you. It's really great. Kinan Valdez is the producing artistic director of El Teatro Campesino, the farm workers' theater. He is also the son of famed American playwright and activist Luis Valdez, and therefore a lifelong practitioner of theater of the sphere, a theatrical approach to life imbued with the philosophical resonance of ancient America and rooted in the Chicano working class. Please welcome Kinan Valdez.
Thank you. It's an honor. 50 years from now, when we look back from the vantage of the 21st century, perhaps we will mark the year 2012 as a pivotal moment in time. Not as the apocalyptic end times suggested by misguided interpretations of the sacred Mayan calendar, but as a year that spoke the first words of a new creation, a new world, and a new age in the making. Consider these words for a moment. In 2012, the word spread of a playwright in residence who felt compelled to use her position at a major American theater to call for a convening of the nation's Latino theater makers. In 2012, the word spread of a consortium of 9 theater companies from the 5 boroughs of New York who formed an organizing network to share resources and advocate for their field. In 2012, the word spread of ad hoc alliances and creative coalitions forming and forging throughout the country to foment new opportunities for individual artists and companies alike. And here, from this conference in 2012, the word spread that the annual impromptu gathering of Latino theater movers, makers, and shakers coming together for a moment to break bread had organically transformed into a dynamic call to organize, to energize, and materialize a new movement by any and all means necessary. This movement I speak of is the Latinos in Theater movement. It is once both new life spreading out, weaving its web like an unruly and beautiful spider tree, and a new manifestation of life returning from a rich soil permeated by deep and powerful roots. We all stand on the shoulders of giants. Giants who blasted through barriers and faced the fire while building bridges for the generations coming after them. This is true equally of the individuals who never took no for an answer, and of the fierce movements that forever altered the way we get to perceive our place in this world. All of us are here today because of our ancestors and our antecedents and our artists and our activism and our pioneers and our people power. In the current case of the Latinos in Theater movement, we recognize the spiritual connections to our forebears and continue to draw inspiration like water from the well springs they cultivated. One such entity was a national alliance forged during the social upheavals of the 1960s and 70s and known as TENAS, the National Theater of Aztlán. TENAS in Spanish means tenacious, and tenacious it was. During its time, TENAS boasted a membership of over 80 Chicano, Latino, and Native peoples theater companies, hailing from every corner of the country and key regions of the continent. During its time, TENAS held annual international theater festivals to share new and dynamic work and hosted trainings and symposiums to stimulate aesthetic and political development and kept this transnational community connected in spirit and in practice. But as the global cultural and structural changes began to emerge in the 1980s, TENAS simply faded away. But not from our hearts and not from our collective memory. And so, fueled by the example of this giant and other ancestors too numerous to name, the Latinos in Theater movement begins to mobilize again, ready to embrace the context of the here and now. The world indeed has changed since the time of TENAS, but at the most fundamental level, people are still people. And it is from our fellow human beings that we still find our greatest strengths and our greatest gifts. And it is this most precious of resources upon which the Latinos in Theater movement focuses its energy. In the last year, a few initial trends have emerged, suggesting the strategies and the tactics of this burgeoning movement. In general terms, they are: 1, see and seize opportunities wherever they materialize. 2, assess our assets and activate the access to shared resources. 3, build regional coalitions and national networks to generate robust relationships. 4, create the spaces to imagine new places. And 5, think horizontally and act horizontally. Since 2012, we have seized upon any opportunity to foster any type of communication, big or small, at national conferences, at international festivals, in organized regional gatherings from Portland, Oregon to Miami, Florida, as addendums to co-production planning meetings between companies. Wherever two or more Latino theater makers congregate, this movement has been present, building connections and spreading the word. Since 2012, we have begun assessing the assets of the field. We have recognized the continued existence of companies with 20, 30, 40, even 50 years of active service and active spaces. These companies with facilities have begun to open their homes to other artists, hosting this movement and spreading the word. Since 2012, numerous coalitions have flourished in multiple regions. The Alliance of Latino Theater Artists in Chicago, the Alliance of Los Angeles, the Latino Theater Alliance, the New York Latino Theater Alliance, the San Antonio Latino Theater Alliance, and right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, TANTO, Teatro Alianza of North Texas Organizations. Every time these coalitions meet, this movement is present, spreading the word. Since 2012, new conceptualizations of shared space have emerged, and we have moved to capitalize on their existence. TCG 2.0, the online community, has become a major platform for the rapid exchange of information and ideas pertinent to the Latinos in Theater movement. HowlRound has nurtured the formation of the Latino Theater Commons and Cafe Onda, dedicated to building and sharing knowledge and resources that belong to everyone. Every time someone logs on to 2.0, or the LTC gathers for a call, this movement is present, spreading the word. And later this year, in 2013, planned through a horizontal process that was participatory in nature, the Latino Theater Commons will host the first major national convening of Latino theater makers and shakers in over 25 years, the first since the final days of Tenaz. At this convening, the movement will be present, as will be the word, past, present, and future. 2012 may have signaled the arrival of a new age, but it is in 2013 that we see the future materialize in the hearts and the minds of the people who are imagining it. Like the Mayan creator gods who joined in council at the beginning of time to create the universe by speaking the word, so do we bring this new world into existence through our conversation, respecting the right to speak and respecting the responsibility of listening. It is through the word, the spoken word, the written word, the invented word, and the remembered word, the word as process, the word as commitment, the word as our bond, that this movement generates new life and creates a vision of a dynamic future for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kinan. That was very powerful, and the fact that you spoke about the past, the present, and the future, and the word offers me an opportunity, perhaps, to segue to ask each of our speakers one question, and then we'll open the floor to all of you. But we'll start with you, Kinan, and reverse the order a little bit. I wonder if you could speak, looking forward to the future. As we all do, in a wonderful conference like this, we all have opportunities to sort of reframe our thinking about what we'll do next. Can you talk a little bit about one particular challenge, either for you personally as a member of the movement, or for El Teatro Campesino as a theater in the movement or for the movement that you see yourself addressing as you go forward from here?
Well, I think one of the challenges is also one of the beauties of this particular movement. I mentioned Tenas, and in the days of Tenas, all the companies and people were somewhat similar. And now, from this particular vantage point as well, we see that there's such a biodiversity of companies, of approaches, and the challenge and the beauty is to celebrate all of that and create opportunities from the top to the bottom. I've mentioned it before, is that the early movement focused on the grassroots. Well, we want to go from the grassroots all the way up to the grass tops. And so how do you do that, right? But that is the vision of this particular movement. But it's also one that we've talked a little bit about changing the narrative of American theater. But we need to first take a look at the narratives that we tell ourselves. We have to have the courage to take the next step in terms of our own thinking. And so we have tremendous opportunities present just to communicate. And those are some of the big challenges. But in terms of communication, just mobilizing people together. So we're taking advantage of every single opportunity that exists. Today, there's quite a few Latinos in Theater meetings here at this conference. So thank you, TCG, for creating those opportunities. Tanto, the Texas organization that I made reference to, is actually using this particular opportunity to talk to all the Latino theater people from all throughout the country are here. They're having a session this afternoon at 4 o'clock over at the Latino Cultural Center right here in Dallas, and we're all welcome to join them starting at 5 o'clock. And so there are all these particular intersecting points, and so how do you just weave that web, but allow people to speak for themselves and just stay connected?
Thank you. Laurie, can you talk about a challenge that either you're experiencing as an artist at Bloomsburg, or that Bloomsburg is experiencing, or that the field needs to address?
Sure.
Yeah.
How to pick. Well, at the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, we just finished our 35th season, and we just got our first emeritus ensemble member. A founding member, Jerry Stropnicki, is now an emeritus member. That's how old we are. That's got me thinking about one of the challenges for us and for all of those theater ensembles that have managed to last, and there are many of them. We are what Todd London calls the oxymorons. We are established and alternative. Yeah. But you know, we are facing those life challenges that people face in life, the aging of our ensembles. And you know, one of those challenges involves the ability, the grace to pass on the ensemble to younger folks. We're doing that at BTE. It's not always easy. And also one of the hard things about ensemble that everybody knows about is that they are ensembles. We have a big group of people to support. I would venture to guess that probably the biggest budget line in any of our ensemble theaters are the budget line that has to do with paying the artists. Yeah. So I've been very grateful how the theater field has really come to embrace the ensemble theater making as a valid way to make theater. That has happened, and I'm grateful for that. I hope to see that in years to come, funders look at the life cycles of ensembles and the life needs of ensembles and consider the possibility of salary and health benefits support for ensemble members.
Adrian, from your perspective, can you talk about a challenge that you see?
Well, my reaction to both of these people is that you know, they're so wonderful, and I want to take some of that energy and that excitement from them. However, in years of nomadic existence, I came to realize that theater is not just about the people doing it. And that's why in my speech, I try not to be too harsh in talking, but the community plays an extraordinary part. I mean, Peter Brooks told us, that theater is made when, one person is looking and the other person walks across the room, because it's an encounter with two things. And so on that, you can take the thing, you can assume that theater is, for just a loose definition, a confrontation between the actor and the audience, and how they come together is what makes the event. Now, the addition to that is necessary is the cherry on the sundae is the audience, i.e. the community. Okay, so our goal is not to better ourselves. Our goal is to find a community by community by community until we have influenced the whole country. That seems to be the goal. Nothing that we have said this morning is being said for the first time. It was said in the beginning when those families that came from various places and traveled in wagons across the country trying to do the theater. Back further, that goes to Molière, who did nothing but travel until finally the Comédie Française was organized for him, and then on and on and on, back all the way to the Greeks. Everybody participated, and that's what our problem is. We're so determined to be better than we are that we kind of forget what we're doing is really important to mankind. What we're doing is changing men's souls, and that's what happens with that.
So we want to open the conversation up. We have about 15 minutes left. We want to open the conversation up to you in the audience for your thoughts, your questions, for discussion with our speakers today. Are the house lights up as far as they can go? Because I can't. Oh, I see a hand here. Yes. Okay. Wait for the microphone because it's streaming and you won't be heard over the internet if you're not on the mic.
Oh. Yes. Hello, my name is Christopher Hartman. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Oklahoma. Yes, trying to make it. One of the things that I have found and have a question for in terms of the future of the theater is that a lot of my friends and fellow students have been moving towards electronic media and especially things like on the internet, television shows and things like that. I was wondering if you all had plans or ideas about keeping the interest in live theater alive, because I think that there's an important connection between audience and performers that is sometimes lost when people go to see films and things like that. I was wondering if you had ideas.
Well, just speaking for Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, that's our primary mode, is live theater. But a lot of ensembles are working with new technology and, as I said, some performances in cyberspace. And you're sitting next to somebody who's working quite well in that field. Whit McLaughlin, New Paradise Laboratory. Talk to him.
Hi. Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
I know there's a fear that theater might fade away, but we are human beings, and as David Lozano mentioned, his theater company that focuses on ceremony, part of the act of doing theater and celebrating and experiencing theater is ceremony. We need that exchange between other human beings. It's what keeps us alive. We draw energy from that. And so I think there may be moments where the technology seems to move into place, But we also have to remember that that essential vibration that we share together, right here in this particular space, is the most amazing experience that can be had. And that will never go away.
Technology's sophistication is not a new thing either. Like the live theater was threatened when radio came in.
Yeah.
And then after that, we were threatened when television came in. And then when movies became an art, that became the people's theater. And we kind of slid back with each technological advance, except they used us, and we never knew how to use them. And so now everybody in this hall truly believes that the people's art is the theater. It is the community. It is men. It is the catharsis that changes men. But it encompasses all of those things. It encompasses television and politics and radio and the whole thing. So we've simply got to be smarter in the sense we should not shy away from doing something in television. If you're working with a small group of people and somebody has an idea or somebody's offered something, do it. You know, you can do it better than they can do it.
Looking for hands. Yes.
So the announcement for this event had said that there was an invitation for quick movement things from the floor. Is that still open?
Yes, please, yes.
All right, I wrote one. I'm Pete Miller from Woolly Mammoth. I'm a board member there, and I've also, I'm mostly an audience member, so that's what I think about a lot. The movement I envision moves new audience members into theaters. It calls for collaborative effort across many institutions to expose people to the joys of playgoing as an avocation, a habit, a hobby, a life's work. It relies on recognizing that other theater companies are not your competition in a tug of war over habituated playgoers. They are instead partners in the great work of bringing new people into playgoing. A person becomes a playgoer by experiencing the right play offered in the right way with a reason to stay. By continuing to diversify theatrical production, you will create that right play for more people. By reinventing marketing, you will offer those plays in ways that new people can respond to. By defining and supporting playgoing as a hobby, you will unlock the social and psychological benefits of hobby participation to give people a compelling reason to stay. These millions of new playgoers will fill your theaters. You will fill their hearts and blow their minds. They will grow to care as much about the American theater as any of us in this room. I think good things will happen then.
I think we've heard, too, from this group, a sense of connection to other theater makers. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about particular opportunities that you've experienced from collaborating with your fellow theater makers around the country?
Well, just the joy of getting together with the network of ensemble theaters. There have been a lot of cross collaborations that have been happening.
Could you describe, you talked a little bit about the fests that are happening around the country. Could you just describe those in a little more detail?
The microfests are, we call them part festival, part think tank, part picnic. You know, we eat a lot of good food there. But we do see performances. We also meet with people who are not directly connected with theater as their life work, but with community organizing and so on. And so there's, you know, we see how communities are being changed by people like that. You know, so it's really great. And we are now sponsoring, we are now
giving out grants to folks to collaborate and exchange and travel to each other and learn from each other.
Grants to members of the network itself. Terrific.
You know, in the beginning, we used to. I remember one time, Word Baker, is that a name that strikes terror to your heart? Word Baker and I decided to have a conference with the just emerging theaters around the country and just talk about a mutual exchange. That if the theater, if Providence had an actor that Seattle wanted, we could exchange. I know in Europe it was the companies were so large, those state companies, that 100 or 200 people connected with the organization, that if they were going to do Iceman Cometh and they didn't have enough character people, you could borrow character people from 3 or 4 different areas of the country. And so that seemed like a wonderful thing for us to aspire to in those early tender days. And then of course very quickly we found out that people were not holding on to a company. Communities were not. It was cheaper, to buy it off the rack from New York, because we would only need a character man for one time this season. And so we wouldn't, So the only people that suffered were the theater people ourselves. But the reason we were, Trinity was originally invited to the Edinburgh Festival, an American company had never been invited to play in that international arena. The thing. And of course the reason was very simple. There were no companies that stayed together long enough to be invited. And so the thing, so my personal sadness about the way things has evolved is that the smaller the company gets, down to 1 or 2 people who are able to travel about and do shows, the less effective it's going to be in changing the world. The less effective it's going to be, and also the more difficult it's going to be for the actors. We now have more actor training in the world than probably any other profession in the world. There are more actors being trained every day. Every university now has gotten on to it, as it were. There's money to be made by offering acting courses. And so more and more, and we all get on the bus immediately and get to New York as quick as we can to make our fame and fortune. And then after a few years, you begin to realize that, if I could just be connected with something. So connection is very important, but not in a small way. Don't be fooled that doing 2-character plays or 3-character plays is going to change anything. Make the community help us. That seems to be the goal. You said it a moment ago, and I love that. When we're changing the community by community. And we're not going to become sophisticated enough or polished enough or desirable enough that we're going to do it in an insular way. Who was it? Hillary Clinton? Somebody said a child had to be raised by a community.
Takes a village.
Right. Okay. Well, the same thing is true of a theater company. When the goal in this country, as far as I will take to my death the dream that there will be theater companies around in every city with a population of over 100,000 people, with every city, and the companies will be at least 100 or 150 people. Do you know how many people Exxon employs? We're far more powerful, and we've lived far longer.
I think we have time for about one more question and response. So.
Hello, my name is Kanisha Foster. I'm a young leader of color with the conference and have been since 2009. And I'm on the diversity and inclusion arc. And we had such an incredible opening session where we looked at the data from Uncommon Common Ground of the census. And we talked about something I think we all know but had the actual numbers to look at, which is the cultural and the racial shift that's happening in the country, which are sometimes overlapping and sometimes different, of course. And it was, just in case people weren't able to see that, I'll give a quick, a very, very short example of what was happening. I think as everyone knows, this past year was the first year that more people of color were born in the United States than white people were born in the United States. And by 2040, the flip will happen so that there are more people of color than there are white people in the United States. So my question to you is, how do you feel as we go in the present and the future, theaters are really addressing this change? And are they not only talking about cultural stories and putting cultural stories on their stage, but are they also employing diversity within their entire organization? And if that change is not happening yet, what advice would you give the organizations and the audience to how to prepare and celebrate that shift?
I guess that's what's for me. Huh?
Well, it could be for anybody, but if you we're going to let you have the last
Part
word.
of, with the Latinos in Theater, what we've been doing in this particular year is really focusing on the opportunities. And part of that is because we have to build a platform that is an inspirational jumping off point. There's so much work to be done just to thread all the resources that we have at our disposal in the here and now. Some of those, in some cases, in major cases, are people who are in major institutions, but it comes down to those individuals who are willing to take that position and open it up just a little bit more to let some people through. And that is not necessarily dictated by color, by principle, because there are people throughout this, throughout our field, right? I think of the Oregon Shakespeare's used that as an opportunity to open it up. I think about Chris Acebo, who's there now, who is going to use this particular theater company as an opportunity to start the Latino Latino Playwrights Project. It's a question of principles and conscience and doing what's right for humanity on an individual level and not an institutional level first. Just tap into your own humanity and open that up, because when it comes down to it, we are all reflections of one another, all of us. We are all part of the same sacred family, if you'd like to see it that way. But I am you, and you are me, and we have to practice that on a daily basis and believe it.
I just want to conclude by saying thank you to all three of you for the inspiration of this morning. I feel that what you've been able to conjure in the room today is a sense of the tradition and the possibility of our field. And I'm reminded of a quotation by a great theologian, Yaroslav Pelikan, who said the difference between, talked about the difference between tradition and traditionalism. And he said that tradition is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of the living. And what I think the three of you have captured here today is the very best of our tradition and our humanitarian project. And I thank you for your wonderful remarks today. Thank you all. Good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
God. Oh, boy. I don't know about you. That was an extremely moving. I was extremely moved by that, and I just have to say I feel very, very fortunate to be here with these folks and here with all of you, and I hope you feel as fortunate as I do. This is just the beginning of this conversation. Kinan will be contributing to a Latinos in Theater closed lunchtime conversation today, and then a breakout focused on the Latino theater movement tomorrow. And in the spirit of learn, do, teach, I have to mention that his predecessor at El Teatro Campesino, Luis Valdez, will be speaking tonight at 7 p.m. at the Latino Cultural Center. I also encourage you to read some of the incisive essays from Latino and Latina theater artists on the TCG Circle and join the Latinos in Theater group on Conference 2.0. It's fantastic. As for ensembles, Laurie McCants is leading a session tomorrow called Survival Stories, Life Lessons from Ensembles that will feature a story circle of a superstar list of ensemble theater makers, and the conversation surrounding these movements has only just begun. Before you leave for your next session, I want to remind you that lunch will be served outside of the Windspear at our mobile cafeteria, the food truck fair. You've got food truck tickets in your name badges if you look in the back. There are also boxed lunches available for those who don't like their food on wheels. Also, for you overachievers, you can sign up for office hours out here, our one-on-one advising session with TCG's exhibitors. These folks out here are TCG's business affiliates, and they are experts at what they do. Please sign up for office hours. They are here for you, and you can learn a lot from these folks. And with that, I thank you, and class is dismissed.